it's a daily thing. I genuinely think it's not like you get to this enlightened place where I have arrived and I don't need any validation from anyone ever again. Like, no, every day we feel like self-doubt and lack. Some days I just feel really selfish and I just want people to tell me how amazing I am. And I feel really insecure about myself.
Welcome back to the Wax Quill Podcast. Woohoo!
Welcome back to the Wax Quill Podcast. I'm Master Joel, and today I am interviewing Daniel McCormack. I found you on Instagram because you posted something about how difficult it is as a writer when you're comparing yourself to other writers, or when people say, oh, you'll be the next Stephen King, and it creates a lot of pressure. So that's going to be our main topic. But first, I want to talk about you. What do you write? How did you become a writer in the first place?
Yeah, so I write epic fantasy predominantly, and that's what I grew up reading. And I don't know, I think maybe the best way there's a long story about how I got into actually writing. But basically, I was living overseas, living in a country called Bosnia, and had a lot of nostalgia for the UK, Cornwall specifically, which is where I grew up and where I'm from. It's this little tiny peninsula on the far southwest, and it's villages and farms and old woodland and all that kind of stuff. And I also felt like there was just a lot of stories that I grew up with, like Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Wheel of Time, and all that kind of stuff. I was struggling to find stories that made me feel the way those stories made me feel. And I think those two things combined, like I just started world building and writing as a way to fulfill that hunger for something that feels like home, like Celtic mythology and old Anglo-Saxon culture as I'm world building, and but also to fuse it with this new place that I'm in, Bosnia. But yeah, it just began as an exercise, and I want to create something that gives me the feeling that I had growing up. Really, I don't know if that answers the question properly, but
It does. No, I'm about to cry because I got married. I'm from the US, right? I got
yes.
married to a Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to Mexico with him for a little while. And I spoke Spanish, but everything was so
Yeah,
different. And
yeah.
I was all alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I missed everything. Even the water's different there. Taking
Yeah.
a shower is different. The water heaters are different. The ovens are
Mm-hmm.
different. And that's when I just dove into writing too. So I almost cried when you said that, but
No, yeah,
sorry. Let's get past the
that's okay.
feelies. Keep going.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I do totally agree with you. That sense of just feeling so immersed in something that feels so foreign, and you don't know how to like process everything that's coming at you, what is right, everything is turned on its head.
Yeah.
And I think that writing is a really good way to process that kind of stuff, or just to escape a little bit as well. And but yeah, so definitely that writing was definitely like an emotional crutch for me, I think, initially. Yeah.
An emotional crutch or emotional wings.
Exactly. Both, depending on the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Tell me about what you write. Let's just start there and how you write.
Yeah, I write. So I'm not writing a book. I decided to tell the story that I wanted to tell would be best told in monthly episodes. So the idea with that is that it's each time I publish an episode a month, my epic fantasy serial, and there's three main characters, and each episode will have a slightly different jump between these different characters. But the idea is that the difference between an episode and a chapter is that an episode is designed to be narratively satisfying. So think about it like the difference between watching a TV episode versus watching a 20-minute chunk of a movie. So that's the idea. And the story that like I said, the story that I'm writing began as a bit of a world building project. This idea of trying to create this fantasy world which draws on the stuff that I felt nostalgia for and like homesick about, and fusing it and melding it with all the stuff I was experiencing in the new culture that I lived in. And like any good fantasy author, I thought that obviously if I'm going to write a fantasy book, I have to write a trilogy. So I started actually outlining a trilogy of books. And as I started writing, I was like, oh, I need to flesh out this part of the history and this part of the culture. And how did this become like this? And like, how did the world get to the point where, this thing that I crafted, how did it get to that point? So I started writing out the history. And I was like, oh, actually, the history of this world and how these different nations were formed and how these different cultures arose and how they view one another and the ways they clash with one another. That's actually a really compelling story. And that just evolved very naturally into this idea of 6 seasons. So each season being 12 episodes. So it'll take me about 6 years to finish writing the story. But yeah, that's how it all came together, really.
Yeah. Do you write by hand? What is your writing routine? Your writing methods? I dictate because I take my kids on walks. So that's how I get all my first drafts done. Otherwise, there's no way I can write them with two little kids. But you're a father of three. So how do you do it?
I'm actually blessed with quite a bit of time at the moment, flexible time, I'd say. So at the moment, I am predominantly caring. My wife has like some chronic health conditions, so I have time free in the morning when kids snapping and that kind of thing. So I do get actually quite a bit of time to write, thankfully. My process is still evolving, and I'm trying to figure it out. If I'm honest, I tend to bang my head against a brick wall for about a couple of weeks each time I start a new episode. And then it feels like the boulder gets to the top of the hill and starts rolling down the other side, and I ride the momentum. But I do outline, like I don't outline very strictly. Like I like to create a loose framework and then have room to maneuver within that with the characters and for things to feel natural. And I currently I type. I use a writing tablet basically. Have you seen the Remarkable writing tablets? They're like e-ink display, and they have a keyboard, and you can use your pen and write by hand on them as well. And it's really good. It's a really good bit of kit. I'll just grab it quickly. I just actually really genuinely love it. It's basically like a Kindle, but you can write on it like a Kindle Scribe, and then it's also got like a little like keyboard in the case as
No.
well. I use it for drawing my maps as well for my fantasy work, that kind of thing. So it's really, really
Whoa.
good. And it's got like a week's battery life. So you with it and type out documents and then email them to yourself or whatever. And it's got no notifications. It doesn't even tell you what time it is or anything. It's literally designed for chronically distractible people like me to be able to write. But you can't dictate to it. So maybe with the kids,
It's too bad. It's the only thing
too
it's
bad.
missing.
Yeah, there you go. That's been a real lifesaver for me, actually, that one. Really helpful tool. But yeah, I think one thing that I'm trying at the moment is this idea of just, what was it? I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was from the book The Artist Way. And the idea is that you just brain dump for the first 3 pages. But at the start of a writing session, you literally just type out like everything that you can. Not even necessarily about the story, your story or what you're writing, just go for it. And that's actually been really helpful in just getting the ball rolling. That's often the hardest part for me is like that act of starting each time I sit down to write.
I have never heard of those before.
Yeah.
And I wish I had, because I think that would have been a big game changer for me. Maybe it still will be.
Yeah, they're really good.
So, how did you know that your story needed to be episodic? And what I am really asking, let me give you my backstory. When I was stuck in Mexico, the story I wrote that I really just dove into, I wrote more than 100,000 words, like well over that for it. And it wasn't even the beginning of the story, right? I wrote way too much, but it's this huge story spanning a long time.
Yeah.
With immortal people and whatever. And I realized, oh my gosh, I am not a good enough writer to write this right now. So let me put it on the back burner. Let me write some other stories and get better, and then I'll come back to it. I recently reread it. I thought it just doesn't fit the regular beat sheet for a novel.
Yeah.
I think it would be more episodic. Do you have any doubts about making your story episodic? How has that changed the way you write it? Changed the way you edit it?
Yeah. So I think that I have never like published a book. So I only know what I'm doing, if that makes sense. There are some really cool, unique things about writing and releasing episodically, especially because like I don't have a huge number of people reading it, but there are some people reading it each month, which is just wonderful.
Quick note, if you want to subscribe to my Subscribe Star, you can support the channel. You can get monthly and weekly updates about what I'm up to, and you can be at the front of the line for podcast interviews with me. Win-win for everybody. If that sounds interesting to you, click on the link below. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the episode.
And as part of our Patreon community, they let me know their feedback and things that they like. And while I have a set mind of what the story is that I want to tell and who each character is, and that's not going to change, I think there is definitely a room that the audience, the readership, can come into that process of the world and the story evolving in a way that doesn't like change or dictate what the story is, But if one person's talking about something about a specific character that resonates with them, when I next come to write that character, I might not consciously choose to do it differently, but that's there in the back of my mind, being like, oh, this really resonated with people. So like there is this kind of like more collaborative in a way, which is really fun. I think that it's just there is no one way to tell a story. So some people will prefer to be able to get a book, sit down and just binge it, just read through the whole thing in a couple of days. And yeah, exactly. And some people like the idea of being along for the ride and being able to talk to me as I'm writing it. And I do like bonus content for each episode I put out. So I get people to vote whether they want a bonus map or a short story or a piece of flash fiction about a character. Or so some people would really enjoy that as that interactive, like more community focused way of telling the story. I don't think it's necessarily one way is better than the other. I think it's just that I just don't think there's not a huge space for serial fiction out there, but I think that it could be really good for a lot of people who maybe they love watching, I don't know, the Rings of Power series or something like that, or they rewatch Lord of the Rings every year, but the idea of picking up these massive, thick, epic fantasy books is just not like, oh, I don't know if I really want to get into reading The Wheel of Time, like the 15-book series, which I love it. But there's a lot of people who could really connect with the cool things that epic fantasy brings to the table, and they would find it much easier in an episodic format than they would in necessarily like a big chunky thick book each year. I think it's also more fun for me as a writer in a way. I get to put out an episode each month rather than just locking myself in a room for the next 6 years and like pouring my heart and soul into this thing and then just say, there you go, everybody.
I hope you
like it. Can't change it now. For me, I would have to write this episodically to write this story well. I think maybe you could format it as a novel, but it just seemed like the most fun way to do it for me. And it seemed to fit really well with this idea of having three very distinct characters who have very different viewpoints on the world and using that as a way to flesh out and explore the world for myself as well.
In your Instagram, you say you're the epic writer for tired parents.
Yeah, I write epic fantasy for tired adults.
For tired adults, thank you.
Yeah,
and is that what you mean? Oh, here's a piece of fantasy that you can consume quickly and then go to bed.
Yeah. Half, yes. Part of it is the format. So we put out an ebook and audiobook each month. So like you can just listen to it on your commute or something like that. And we also put out a piece of music and a piece of artwork with each episode as well. And then the little bits of bonus content. So the idea is that you can get this immersion in an unfolding fantasy world without having to like try and carve out a whole hour or 2 hours to sit down and just read. When I was 16, I powered through The Wheel of Time. I couldn't do that today. Maybe with audiobooks and while I'm like clean or something, but it's quite a different thing these days. The other half of it is I think with tired adults in the sense that I think that there's just after the past decade or so, a lot of soul weariness. I would say for a lot of people, the world isn't going the way that perhaps lots of us would want it to. Whatever camp or political party or whatever you find yourself in, I think everyone's feeling the tension and I think a lot of people are just tired. And I want to write epic fantasy that speaks to that in a way that is not ignoring it, so just escapism, and is not downplaying it, but more of this idea of that art can be consolation. This idea of not just making you feel better, but taking you on a journey with these characters who face these similar things, but find a sense of hope and a sense of empathy and connection with others in the midst of all that. So there's a real through line in my writing of the way that we relate to one another, the way we relate to the natural world, cultures clashing with one another, the whole idea of the established political and social order falling apart around you, and how do you maintain the things that are precious and are good in the midst of all that upheaval and strife. Yeah, so partly the format, but also a lot of it's to do with the content. I'm trying to speak to that kind of parts of us which are just tired, man, like exhausted with the world. Yeah.
Wow. That's so cool that you've noticed that and you've figured out a way to combine what you want to do, the story you want to tell, and doing it in a way that helps the people you want to read it.
Yeah. I think that partly it's like I'm processing this stuff for myself in the writing of it. I think there's this whole thing of, yeah, not that writing is therapy, but that there is this kind of like you're exploring something like your own kind of like weaknesses and failings and your own struggles and stuff in the fiction that you write. Not always like, not like I have a self insert in the stories as one of the characters, which is me, but like all of them in some way reflect something that I've struggled with or gone through. Yeah.
I think we're a lot alike in the
Okay.
way we approach writing because I feel the same way. And I'm a firm believer that every character you write has just a little sliver
Yeah.
of you in them, because
Yeah.
otherwise, how would you be able to write them?
Yeah. For sure.
Oh, this is so juicy. Okay, let's talk about comparisons
Okay.
in
Comparisons.
writing. So, what inspired you to make that post that I saw that talked about, oh, it's great to get compliments about your writing, but also it
Mm.
can really get into your head, not in a good way.
I think the one that you saw and commented on was the one which was a response to a response of me
Oh, okay,
in my
cool.
life.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's one of the people I connected with on Instagram raised the question of what do you do when people start comparing you to other writers or say you're going to be the next C.S. Lewis or you're going to be the next whatever, Tolkien or N.K. Jemisin or whatever. And I think that like that idea of comparing yourself to others is something that as I have gone along this journey of becoming more serious about my writing, I'm wanting to put it out there and put a lot of like effort into it. It's something that I've had to really wrestle with. One day, ideally, I would love to be a full-time author one day. I would love to earn a living from my work. But if I'm going to do that, I want to be able to do it without becoming a complete emotional and nervous wreck. There has to be things that you work through, and being compared to others or comparing yourself to others as a writer is definitely one of those things which is there's almost like an instinctive urge within us that comes from I think some fairly very understandable but also unhealthy places as well. I think that there's a very easy and healthy way of doing it, which is, oh, I write epic fantasy and it's inspired by Tolkien in these ways, or it's inspired by Robert Jordan in these ways, or there's this kind of like, where does your work connect with another person's work? But then there's the more kind of, you can maybe feel pressure, like this idea that, oh, if I write some fantasy, it's got to be as good as insert author here. Otherwise, I will not be satisfied with it. I've got to be writing at this level or doing this well. And then you add into that, perhaps you have friends or peers who you've met through social media or in real life who are also writing. And you can be very tempted to compare your work to theirs, either positively or negatively. You can either be like, oh, I feel pretty good about myself because I think what I'm writing is better than this person's writing, or you can just get completely down on yourself and completely just despondent and discouraged because you feel like your writing doesn't measure up to someone else's, if that makes sense. The through line in a lot of those things is this general feeling of lack and insecurity in ourselves and a need to almost justify ourselves or to seek validation for ourselves in our writing ability, and our own sense of self-worth and identity gets tied to what we're able to produce, which is very very much in a Western culture. The first thing you ask someone is, what do you do for work? What do you do for a living? And that's how we tend to define one another, and like our social status or whatever, like it's often tied to what we produce, and we tend to view ourselves as only being valuable dependent on what we're able to produce. And I think that's actually a really destructive way to view your craft. I think it invites a lot of hurt and pain, and I'm speaking from experience. I can only really share from my own perspective. It'll be different for other people, but for me, it was coming to a point where I was able to say, I don't need to be seen as successful, or I don't need this writing to be a success in order to be at peace with myself and be at peace with God. Like that was a big part of it for me as well. Like this, and it really has just been about transforming writing for me from being this sense of coming from a place of insecurity and a need to feel good about myself and a need to feel like I'm good at something, and making it more outward focused and as a part of my faith is like an act of worship. So the actual process of writing is a worshipful process, but then also it's an act of trying to be loving towards other people, the ones who are going to read it. I want to write something that's worth people's time. I want to write something that means something to them, and not out of a sense of I need them to validate me by telling me how great I am for writing this thing, but more there's just an inherent value in that. It's just inherently valuable to be loving towards other people in telling your story to the best of your ability, to like, does what I'm writing achieve what I want it to achieve for the people who are going to read it? Not is my writing as good as this person or that person, but does it do what it needs to do? Does it connect for the people? And if it does, then wonderful. I would love to be able to make a full-time living from my writing. But if 50 people or like 20 people only ever read what I write, and it connects for them, and they get some sense of like consolation I was talking about from the work, and it's meaningful in some way, then that's a success for me. That's the measurement of success, not insert X figure of money or an award, or I don't know, like a review which says that I'm the next Tolkien and the next Virginia Woolf combined, and somehow it's like I've come to revolutionize literature. Like it's not going to happen. Like then that's okay. It just felt really liberating and freeing to be able to say, if I'm using my writing to love God and using it worshipfully, and if I'm using it as a means by which I can try and be loving towards the people who are going to read it, then that in and of itself is enough. I don't need more than that.
This makes me think of something that someone asked me a little while ago. Too long ago. It took me way too long to find that message and then respond. But they talked about, hey, I'm posting my story regularly. I'm just starting to write it. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm posting it on whatever posting thing they're posting it on. And I'm not getting people to look at it and give me feedback that I need to continue the story. And that made me think back to when I was stuck in Mexico, and the first time I really started this big story, that I was posting it somewhere too every week. And I would just wait and I would check to see if there were comments all the time. And it was so addicting. And I got so excited when there was a comment, and I would take a picture and I'd reread it. And I would wait and I would ask them questions, and then I would just wait for their answers for me to decide how to move the story forward. I figured that wasn't good for me. So eventually I stopped doing that, and I realized my writing's not very good. I need to figure out myself first, because I know what I want the story to be. Like, why am I waiting for other people to tell me what to do when I know what I want it to be, and I know which suggestions I want? I already know which suggestions I'll reject. So it sounds like there's, and maybe I'm just seeing it slightly differently, or maybe I'm seeing it the exact same way. It seems like there's a knife right ahead of you, and if you're depending on what other people think, what other people say, their expectations of your writing, then you're not going to succeed in your writing, because you're going to fall off. But if you, and this is the hard part, if you're writing and not listening to any feedback, and you're not writing with anyone but yourself in mind, if you're wanting to publish it and really make something virtuous, something of good report that will better humanity, that has God's voice in it, then you need to be willing to continue writing in the dark, because sometimes you're not sure what comes next, and you take steps in the dark before it lights up. But you also need to take a little bit of feedback in order to stay. Absolutely. So you have to be, it's like a tight wire. Don't balance yourself just right with feedback, comparisons, and doing your own thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like, if you're, I want to be really careful that I don't come across time like, oh, I've got it all figured out, because I absolutely, like, every time I post a video on social media, like, I'll check like the little, how many likes has it got, who's commented on it, if someone comments on it or shares it or something, and then I get this sort of feeling of, oh yeah, that's really nice. Like I definitely still have that. It's definitely a battle, especially with the social media stuff. That's definitely something that I'm still trying to like to figure out. But I think that there's almost like a peaceful, centered groundedness, like of not being able to receive feedback and criticism and it not be destructive to you personally on any level, and just being able to take it and use it for what it is, but also at the same time not feeling so at all at sea within yourself that any opinion or any wind that blows in just sends you off in whatever direction, like having that conviction in like there is something like a beating heart of this story that I know what it is, even if I can't put it into words. And that's like kind of my North Star when I'm telling this story. And I can hear these suggestions over here and I can hear this feedback over here. But really that's all that is just stuff coming in to help me like do what I'm doing anyway. Does that make sense? So you're not like letting yourself be blown about by every kind of opinion that comes in. Like as the writer, I feel like with my stories, I know who each character is and what their story is about, and I know what the overall story is for. But absolutely, I expect to grow in the process and to learn and to change and to receive that feedback. And but yeah, it feels like there's this solid heart that you're like holding on to, like this is almost like ballast in a boat in a storm. Like it just keeps you upright, and it's like this. Like I can receive, the feedback, the criticism, but stay on course.
It's good. And I didn't mean to, I hope it didn't come across as me saying, oh, yeah, you're
Yeah,
listening to feedback. Shame on
yeah.
you. I didn't mean
No, no,
that.
no,
I meant it
I didn't
as,
take it that way.
there's a balance, is what I meant to
Absolutely,
say.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. No, don't worry.
That's amazing. And I think it's something that you're always self-correcting too.
Yeah, it's a daily thing. I genuinely think it's not like you get to this enlightened place where I have arrived and I don't need any validation from anyone ever again. Like no, like we every day we feel that kind of like tension of like self-doubt and lack, and yeah, everything is it's a daily battle. Like some days I just feel really selfish and I just want people to tell me how amazing I am, and I feel really insecure about myself, so I just want that kind of positive input from. But other days I'm really able to be like I can sit down and have a really great writing session and I'm not thinking about myself, I'm thinking about being thankful to God and trying to create something really that is what it needs to be, and everything in between.
All right. Thank you so much for being here today. Where can the people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I publish all my writing up on my Patreon. So that's patreon.com/, Tales of Teltra, Teltra. I don't know if you could maybe put like a link in the description somewhere or something like that. I'm also pretty active on Instagram, and I've also started a talk channel as well. The first 3 episodes of my epic fantasy serial are free to listen to or to read up on the Patreon, and they each one introduces one of my 3 main characters. So yeah, if you want to check it out, absolutely, that's the place to go.
Link below.
Link
Go read
below.
it. And then lastly, very lastly, is there any
Yeah.
homework you would give to the people listening to help them on their writing journey? Anything that's helped you?
Homework. I would say the first thing that springs to mind is the most recent new addition to my writing routine, which is just brain dumping at the beginning of a writing session. So what I do is I just open up a blank page document with my keyboard and I just write. And to be honest, it usually ends up being some kind of like mess of a prayer journal entry. Oh God, what am I doing? But it's just like getting down everything that's in my brain on the paper in front of me or on the screen in front of me, and I try and write it as with as nice a turn of phrases as I can, like just in the flow of it, not going back and editing it, but just get it. And that just feels like, I don't know how it is for you guys in the States. Here in the UK, the sea is like really cold. And when I go swimming in the sea, I love it, but the first whatever 10 seconds is like absolute torture. And it's just really cold. But once you're acclimatized and once you're actually swimming, it's just the most wonderful thing. You don't even feel the cold anymore. But I think that I'm finding writing is a bit like that. If I just try and start a little bit and go, oh, I don't know, it just takes me absolutely ages to really get in and get going. But what I'm finding now is if I do this whole brain dump thing, it's a bit like just jumping straight into an icy ocean, doing 10 little like strokes, and then I'm already in, and it's a lot easier just to keep going after that. So there you go. That's my long-winded way of giving you some homework of just next time you sit down to write, just try doing a big old brain dump and see how that goes.
Awesome. That's great
Yeah.
advice. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
And
no worries.
writers, go write your books and check out Daniel's Patreon and go read his books. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.